Hello, everybody. It's Sunday, the 21st of September, 2025. We are just 2 days away from the publication of one of the most important books published in the 21st century, a masterpiece of political memories. It's entitled 107 Days, and it's by the great writer and thinker, philosopher, moral voice of our age, Kamala Harris. And in all seriousness, longtime viewers of the show, listeners know that I really don't like Kamala Harris. I find her offensive on every front. I think she was the most diabolical candidate probably in the history of presidential elections, and she deserved to lose. I'm no great lover, of course, of Donald Trump, but that's another matter. So I thought, in terms of perhaps defending Kamala in this new book, which I think reveals all sorts of interesting things about her, I would ask my old friend, David Masciotra, a man of the left from Middle America, the author of all sorts of interesting books, including his latest, Exerbia Now, to come on and defend the great Kamala Harris. And I asked him, and he said to me, I can't, because I think he himself is not exactly impressed with some of the stuff that's come out about 107 days, all sorts of reviews already. So I thought that was a perfect opportunity to invite David onto the show so that we, two white men of all terrible things, could pile into poor, victimized Kamala. So David, have I been unfair? Is Kamala finally getting what she deserves in terms of the criticism, the ridicule that this new book, 107 Days, seems to have ignited against her?
Well, after your amusing introduction, I hate to open on such a dour note, but I remember Norman Mailer once said that the only thing Americans will die for is their acumen. And so many people are frightened, petrified, horrified of admitting they were wrong. So I'm going to be countercultural and tell you that I remember we had a few spats about Ms. Harris, and I insisted you were overly critical of her. You were harsh. But now I must say that I was wrong. And
say it again, David. Say it again. I'm going to repeat.
I was wrong. You were right, and you had detected something empty and petty at her core that I, perhaps because I was such an ardent opponent of Donald Trump, as I still am, and needless to say, I believe she would make a better president than him. That's such a low bar. I had missed. And the first two excerpts of this memoir reveal someone who's not only a callous, petty, self-involved careerist, but perhaps even worse, a profoundly ineffective one. She seems to believe that the Democratic base of voters, the dwindling number of readers of political nonfiction in this country, is salivating for yet another revelation that, surprise, surprise, Joe Biden is old. You could knock us over with a gust of wind after that revelation. Meanwhile, our society increasingly falls into the hands of this deranged, demented autocrat. And she's giving us fan fiction about what the campaign would have been like had she selected Pete Buttigieg. It's very difficult to discern what the motive of this literary, political travesty was. But it would have been better left on a hard drive in her home in California.
Yeah, and just to be clear, David, you're usually right. I'm usually wrong. I'm amazed that I've actually been right about something. I'm rather like Donald Trump. I think twice a day, as a stop clock, I can be right. I just sense something wrong with this woman. I wonder, before we get to the details of the book, Simon & Schuster publishes this kind of trash. I mean, clearly there's a commercial market for it, I guess, at airports. I'm guessing that 99% of the books actually bought won't be written. is there some sort of, I wouldn't say moral responsibility, but maybe an aesthetic responsibility of a publisher like Simon and Schuster not to publish such garbage?
I would think so. I mean, so many of the books that have come out of the likes of Simon and Schuster since Donald Trump's inauguration were clearly written by authors who assumed Kamala Harris or some Democrat would win. They weren't prepared for a Trump presidency. I would think Ezra Klein falls into that category. We can't say that about Ms. Harris. When she wrote this book, she knew she was not president-elect, but that's how the book seems to read. Now, as far as the public industry goes, they seem to have rejected any moral or aesthetic sense in their recent history, and this book is the latest in a series of horrific missteps. And you said there's a market for it, in airports, but I really wonder, what is the market? I mean, if she were to have written something that was honest and engaged with the bigger picture following her campaign, which by many measures was historic, there's a market for that.
It's historically incompetent, I think.
But I mean historic in the neutral sense. She's a Black woman, the circumstances by which she obtained the nomination. But what is the market for attacks on Joe Biden, fantasies of Pete Buttigieg as her running mate? It's just so on the surface absurd. And I guess if you were to dig beneath the surface, you'd find nothing there. Ernest Hemingway's iceberg theory would fail us in this moment, because underneath the water, we just find a black hole.
Explain, we're not all as literary as you, David. What was Hemingway's iceberg theory?
Hemingway said that great stories must function like an iceberg, and what the writer describes on the surface is just the tip of the iceberg. So you leave it to the reader to detect some deeper, larger meaning underneath the iceberg, but you do it subtly so as to avoid didacticism. Here, we have no bulk or body of the iceberg. Hemingway would say, "I give up."
Yeah, Hemingway would certainly give up. One of the most troubling aspects of it is this kind of abuse of language. I mean, we talked about the publisher. Harris put a post out on Facebook, which I found a slide for, and then David, you suggested I put the slide together too. So two minds think alike on this. There is, I haven't had a chance to read the book yet. I'm not sure if it's even out. I've read some of the quotes in it, but is there a linguistic element here in terms of her use of Gore Vidal's quote?
Yeah, Gore Vidal, who is arguably America's greatest political essayist, and a quite fine novelist too. I've written quite a bit about Vidal. He's an inspiration to me. He was also known as a great wit, and one of his wittiest remarks was, the three most beautiful words in the English language are, or four most beautiful words in the English language are, "I told you so."
Yeah, actually, jumping in here, I hadn't thought of that, but I did tell you so, David, didn't I?
Right. I mean, we're getting a little meta here. You told me so, and Vidal told us also about many things. But Harris takes that quote and says, "I disagree." She's writing about her warnings, which were correct, regarding the economic costs of Trump's tariffs. And she quotes Vidal, and then she says, "I disagree. These aren't beautiful words." Could you imagine her on like the Dick Cavett show?
Can you imagine her with Buckley and Vidal in the middle of it?
Right, trying to debate Vidal about the veracity of his witticism. but what it reveals, Andrew, is that there's a certain uh, inescapably dull quality to all of this. You're taking one of the great wits and engaging with him as if it was a religious creed, and it makes one wonder, who is the audience here?
Yeah, and it's not just who's the audience, but who's the author, and it speaks to something else, which I think this reveals is she's in a separate universe, certainly to you and I think to most of the rest of America, outside maybe a few high functionaries in the Democratic Party. She's speaking a language, she has a worldview, an ontology, which is entirely separate and foreign. As you say, she doesn't understand humor, so she doesn't understand that the Vidal remark was a joke. She has no parrot, she has no sense of humor, no sense of making fun of herself or anyone else except Trump in her own sort of vulgar way. Does this reflect some sort of weirdly parallel universe? It's almost science fictional, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. That it's almost like uh, she's engaging with people as holograms.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that again, we're all pining for her settling of old scores with Joe Biden, who, by the way, I have to say, she transforms into a sympathetic figure with these attacks. I mean, as Joe Biden's successor is dismantling civil society, and the timing of Harris's book is perfect. I mean, as Trump is threatening the First Amendment, she comes out swinging against Joe Biden. It makes you sympathetic with Biden, who did stay in the race too long and who did outwear
And it's
his
hardly, that
welcome.
is hardly news, is it?
Right, exactly. But yeah, she's almost engaging with us as if we're holograms, uh, holograms designed for her own edification and amusement. That as if we don't understand Vidal's joke, we don't understand anything about political leadership, of which she wants any role. She must engage with the multiple crises converging in our society right now, but she chooses to ignore all of those. It seems to redefine navel gazing. And I tried to think maybe her model here was Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened? After Clinton lost to Trump, she put out a campaign memoir. But Clinton's book, I don't know,
I
did you
did
read
not
it?
read it, I have to admit.
Clinton's book was full of, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, full of substantive political analysis and media criticism regarding the issues that her and Trump made central to their arguments in that campaign. And I don't suspect we're going to get anything approaching that level of political literacy in this.
Yeah, and I mean, any
would
book
be
that
great.
makes Hillary Clinton look readable or interesting, I think, is in itself a remarkable achievement. And in terms of Biden, of course, Biden apparently can't even get a book deal, or probably can, but he's not getting the kind of money that he thinks ex-presidents or his people thinks ex-presidents deserve, because no one's interested in what he thinks or says. Let's
Right.
get,
I'll introduce him to my
David,
agent.
let's get to the stuff on Buttigieg. To me, is astonishing. I'm quoting him here. I'm quoting the Harris book here from the FT. She writes about Buttigieg. He would have been an ideal partner if I were a straight white man. But we were already asking a lot of America to accept a woman married to a Jewish man. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big a risk. Coming back to this idea of a parallel universe, my sense is that no one, or very, very few people, cared about Harris as a woman, a black woman, the fact that she was married to a Jewish man. They just cared that she was a clueless politician. She seems to be living again in this alternative universe where people are only thought of in terms of their race and gender and sexuality. Now, this may be an area where you and I disagree. Is that fair, or am I now sounding a little like Trump?
We do disagree on this score, and I'll tell you why. The numbers indicate that Harris maintained Biden's level of support with women in every racial, education, and class demographic, but she lost support with men in every demographic. I don't think that's coincidental. I do think that we live we still inhabit a political culture that is sexist, one that consistently holds women in power or seeking power to different standards than men. And one of the most damning evidences of that thesis, or supportive pieces of evidence of that thesis, is the influence of the manosphere, which is chock full of misogyny and vulgarity.
A show actually on the manosphere.
I saw it. It was a good show. So on that I disagree, but I will agree with you on Harris's use of it in this particular passage, which first of all is very unfair to Pete Buttigieg. He's preparing a run for the presidency, and she comes out potentially undermining his campaign. So I don't like that aspect of it. But then second, for her to use it in this very self-involved way is something that is not only unbecoming, but also a distraction from those attempting to make a more substantive argument about the influence of sexism and chauvinism in American politics and culture.
Yeah, and speaking of the quote-unquote Jewish husband, which I don't think most Americans care about one way or the other.
I don't think most Americans even knew he was Jewish. So I agree with you there.
Although aren't all lawyers from Los Angeles Jewish, David? That was a joke. That was a joke. Don't accuse me of anti-Semitism. But the New York Times does quote Doug Emhoff, whatever his name is, the husband of Harris, from the book. It says, and this is what he said. He was really angry. They hide you away for 4 years, give you impossible shit jobs. Don't correct the record when these tasks are mischaracterized. Never fight back when you're attacked. Never praise your accomplishments. And now finally, they want you out there on that balcony, standing right beside them. I mean, this, firstly, why is she quoting it? It's not his book. It's if he wants to write a book, then he can write a book about her. Why is she quoting that? Secondly, there's this sort of insidious smell of victimhood. This idea of these wealthy, privileged people who live dreamlike lives as victims. What does it tell you, David? It's so disturbing and distasteful.
It's disturbing and it's distasteful, and it indicates that she has no capacity for leadership in the current American political context. Yes, Doug, her husband, is her primary source, evidently, for this memoir. Instead of quoting Doug about how poorly she was treated, why isn't she quoting a nurse who worked at a defunded Planned Parenthood clinic, or quoting an immigration attorney who's attempting to stop the onslaught of deportations? Why isn't she quoting a teacher in Florida who's been fired under this regime that is suffocating education, academic freedom, and free speech? it indicates a level of narcissism that is shocking. You know, I mean, Gore Vidal said, "A narcissist is someone better looking than you." I am going to take a cue from Kamala Harris and say, in all earnestness, Gore Vidal was wrong. A narcissist is actually someone who can't see the world outside of their own foibles and battles and assets and liabilities. And that's what she's revealing with this book, that this campaign that resulted in the election of a truly dangerous and autocratic leader who has already caused mass misery is really all about her and the way in which she was treated poorly by the
Joe Biden of all people. It's like being, what's the phrase about being mauled by a sheep? I think it's from a British, from a British politician.
And I will add this, and you know, you may not want to go down the road of inside party Democratic politics.
No, I do, and to me, this is what this book most reveals.
Well, let me just say this about Biden. Biden gave her the job of vice president. And I know from a source in a pretty high level of Democratic Party, and this has been confirmed since my source told me this, which was days after it happened. Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they didn't want Biden to endorse anyone. They wanted an open primary. Biden countered their wishes by endorsing Harris, which essentially acted as a coronation of her as the nominee. So she wouldn't even have had these 107 days if it wasn't for the guy who evidently she thinks is public enemy number one.
Yeah, and she talks about in the book, this is from the New York Times, from Carl Lazada's review of the book. She writes about she writes, "I knew I was the candidate in the strongest position to win, the most qualified and ready, the highest name recognition, a powerful donor base." I mean, what does that tell us? And maybe there's some truth to that, but what does this tell us about the process in the party, this rotten party, this not so much rotten, but a party that's rotting away, that would be able to produce such a clownish candidate and then this absurd justification of a book? I mean, it's just so disturbing again and troubling and I'm not perhaps quite as progressive as you, but I'm no bigger fan of Donald Trump than you or many millions of Americans. It's so troubling, this.
Well, yeah. Well, now we're getting into the stakes of the issue and why, even though we can have a laugh, this is a serious indication.
It's a tragedy. I mean, in all tragedies, I'm sure Gore Vidal or Hemingway says something like this, all tragedies are also funny in their own weird way.
Yes. And then Karl Marx, of course, had that line, first it comes
first tragedy, then farce. I mean, I don't know what the original tragedy, maybe Hillary was the tragedy, this is the farce.
But you know, this is the Democratic Party right now is our only political bulwark against this authoritarian transformation of our society. And that's one of the main reasons why Trump is having such an easy go of it, because this party cannot find its energy, cannot find its confidence. It refuses to exercise its imagination. And it's tragic and catastrophic because the stakes couldn't be higher. And Kamala Harris, you know, she was elevated into this role of leadership. And that comes with a certain responsibility. And if you're not willing to live up to that responsibility, which is statesmanship and probity and courage and clarity in terms of what this fight will determine, then just stay home.
Yeah, it's
Remain
the
silent.
loyalty, and there's the loyalty element. Though Waltz was clearly another clown, but it was her choice. And the
Right.
fact that in this book she goes after Walz as well, because he didn't perform well in the debate with Vance, is itself a reflection of just such poor judgment. She chose the guy. Why is
Right.
she piling into him of all people? I mean, he wasn't a good candidate, but he was her choice.
Yeah. Walsh was a total clown. And, when it became clear that he was dishonest about many episodes in his life, the Harris campaign panicked and pulled him off of television. So, everything, maybe Doug should apply the logic that he did to Harris's whining to Walls. They handicapped Walls, and Walls was a clown, but he could also be at times funny, and he also had a sterling reputation with progressives who Kamala Harris was losing throughout the campaign. So they pull this guy off of TV, and then they send him out there. Yes, he did terribly against Vance. He seemed more interested in befriending Vance than defeating him in a debate. And yeah, for her to now come out and attack the guy shows an astonishing lack of self-awareness because she selected him. And it also shows, once again, an astonishing lack of judgment. Why are you attacking Tim Walz when the current vice president is promising to prosecute so-called liberal organizations that oppose the president of the United States?
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, David, I mean, this is not a particularly fair conversation, but to be fair, neither of us have read the book. I mean, I'm sure there are bits in the book where she goes after Vance and Trump, but it's just this lack of loyalty. I remember my son told me before she ran for president that he had a couple of very close friends who were very close friends with Doug Elmholtz's daughter. And they spoke so poorly of Harris, about her lack of loyalty, about her ambitiousness. It just, there's something about her that's profoundly flawed, that she would go after Waltz in a book like this. It's no wonder that one of the other things that comes out of the book is apparently Gavin Newsom never called her back, which probably reflects quite well on Gavin, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, sometimes when a candidate does really poorly throughout a campaign, that candidate later redeems himself, and we learn that he maybe just wasn't fit for a presidential campaign. I'm thinking of Al Gore. Al Gore, after losing that election, under very questionable circumstances, we'll just put it that way, he did great work, and he demonstrated that he was a man of substance. He just didn't campaign particularly well. To a lesser extent, one could say that about John Kerry. But this craven, bizarre maneuver, it demonstrates that she never really had any substance to begin with, because who would think this is a good idea? Who possibly would think this is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the book is an okay idea to make.
Oh, but money. I would say about the book,
right? To put this kind of nonsense in the book.
We have not read it. However,
yeah, but we know the quotes, and they've released the quotes. I mean, and clearly she's somehow behind the quotes. There's the stuff on Biden. There's also the stuff on Josh Shapiro, and Shapiro's already firing back the idea that she couldn't trust him because he was too ambitious as a number two.
Right. It kept gnawing at her. No, I was gonna say exactly what you said. And for anyone watching or listening who's never had any experience with the publishing industry, they can't run excerpts without author approval. And I'm sure that's especially true for an author of Harris's stature. So she's strategically placing these attacks on Biden, Walz, Shapiro, Newsom, and just trying to set fire to an already weak, enfeebled Democratic Party.
Right.
It's really.
I mean, there's two ways of thinking about this, David. On the one hand, she's just a wannabe Lady Macbeth who fails on every front, and she's an absurd, clownish figure who will be a footnote to a footnote, Biden already being a footnote. And that this will kill any possibility of Kamala running again, and who knows what will happen. She'll end up at some think tank somewhere, at some obscure university. On the other hand, that this does in fact reflect something deeply structurally problematic about the Democratic Party. Which view do you take on this?
I don't think they're dichotomous. I think they're both correct. It reveals her own sorrowful lack of seriousness and lack of care and concern. But it also reveals that the Democratic Party has become stagnant, inert. It's frozen because it can't see beyond some framework that they developed in the early 2000s, and they seem terrified to step into a culture of authenticity and accessibility, and they need to allow their younger leaders to rise to positions of prominence, and they need to understand that this is a moment that rewards aggression and commitment to defiance. I thought maybe at first she was thinking she had to attack Biden to engage in CYA for the next campaign, but now it reveals something
What's
much
CYA?
Covering her ass.
Oh.
That maybe she thought if she could blame Biden for her own inadequacies, that would help her launch her next campaign. But even that reveals a profound misunderstanding of American politics in 2025.
And also, some of the media response is, CNN, which after a while begins to sound like the party propaganda of the Democratic Party, its headline on this is Harris stops biting her tongue in 107 days. What kind of headline is that?
Well, and it prompts the question, why did she bite her tongue to begin with?
Exactly. Why'd she even run?
Joe Biden.
If Emhoff is so right, if she was treated so badly and given all these quote unquote shit jobs, she should have just quit.
Right. And Joe Biden, when she ran, had an approval rating in the high 30s. I could certainly understand if Joe Biden was seen as an FDR-like hero of the entire country, and therefore she was petrified of getting on his bad side. But if she at any moment in that campaign would have criticized Biden and distanced herself from him, it would have helped, not hurt. So why did she bite her tongue? No one made her bite her tongue except herself. And the political circumstances and context in which she ran would have rewarded her for having a loose tongue, not for biting her tongue. So the entire thing is whining taken to the worst level, and a lack of understanding of even the 107 days that she experienced.
Yeah, I wonder, David, whether we've even got 107 female listeners or viewers left. Maybe we don't even have one. You and I, both white men, have trashed her, and some women might say, well, this is really unfair, which maybe it is, although I think she is herself personally indefensible. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, there's an interesting story about Erica Kirk, who apparently, and I'm quoting a headline now from the Wall Street Journal, who helped build a movement at her husband's side, which I think from some conservatives' position is where women should always be, now taking center stage. I wonder, in terms of the history of women in politics and sort of 21st century history or culture of post-feminism, whether the Erica Kirk narrative can be compared and contrasted in a particularly interesting way with this farce of Kamala Harris.
Well, I will say that another topic on which we disagree is Hillary Clinton. I've always admired Clinton, and I think she would have made a very good president.
You really believe a very good president, David?
Yes.
Better than Kamala Harris?
I think that Harris.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
What did you say? What was the last?
I said better than Kamala Harris.
Yeah, certainly. Even though you're teasing me. And I think that for the reasons I stated earlier and others, Harris really does a disservice with this book to women seeking office, women seeking positions of power. Not that men have always been.
Yeah, although that speaks again of her view of the universe, is that anytime anyone would think that Harris is a terrible candidate, they think all women are terrible candidates, which is her view of Pete Buttigieg and being married to a Jewish man. And people might just conclude, as I do, that she's a completely incompetent political candidate and she shouldn't have been president, and she's got what she deserved, and it has nothing to do with her being a woman. And it doesn't suggest anything one way or the other about other females.
No, what I'm saying is this book makes herself look worse, and instead of trying to elevate women's voices in the party, she's quoting her husband about how she was mistreated. Now, as far as Erica Kirk goes, there's an interesting hypocrisy that exists on the right, in that there are many prominent women, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, who make their bread by ridiculing feminism.
And that's an interesting metaphor to choose, and make their bread, David.
I did that intentionally. Good job catching it. But by ridiculing feminism,
shouldn't you have said leaven their bread then? In good biblical, in good biblical terms,
right? By ridiculing feminism, and it's the feminism that has made their entire lives possible, and yet no one asks them that question. So Candace Owens couldn't do what she does, and Erica Kirk wouldn't be able to take this position if it wasn't for the very brand of liberal feminism and its courageous leaders who made a more egalitarian society. Yet they'll go on bashing liberal feminism and acting as if it is a detriment to all social stability. So that's another absurdity, I guess.
Although, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I asked you a question about Erica Kirk and you came back, you led with an answer about Hillary Clinton. But I wonder whether this headline about Kirk and whether she's going to become a more prominent figure like some of the wives or girlfriends of the Trump boys, whether this reflects a narrative which Margaret Atwood could have written, or she warned us about, certainly in Handmaid's Tale.
I see what you're driving at. That is what you're saying, that the only road to success for a woman in Republican politics is as the mate of some man,
right? And as the producer, the bread leavener, the child producer, the faithful right hand person, the figure behind all successful men are, of course, these women who stay at home, have babies, have blonde hair, and are entirely loyal to their husbands.
Yes, well, that's beginning to infiltrate our society in surprising ways. Recent articles and recent sources with whom I've discussed it are seeing it more and more on college campuses, in something that they refer to as the wellness space, the trad wife movement. And what we're seeing here is in this turn away from liberalism, people will eventually suffer the costs, because there were reasons why liberalism was ascendant in the second half of the 20th century. It was because the status quo that preceded it led to myriad forms of abuse and exploitation and unhappiness and dissatisfaction. In the words of one of my favorite novelists, James Lee Burke, anyone who talks about the good old days wasn't there. And that's something that these young women who idolize Laura Trump and Erica Kirk, that's something they're going to learn in ways much more painful than Erica Kirk and Laura Trump, because they'll just be married to some guy in the suburbs who doesn't treat them well, carting the kids off to school and church every week, whereas Laura Trump and Erica Kirk get to live as feminists while denouncing feminism.
Yeah, and I'm sure one person, she's no longer alive, but one person who is enjoying this, if she's seeing it, would be Phyllis Schlafly.
Yes.
Who kind of warned us about it, but was on the right. Fascinating stuff, David. So many ironies about husbands and wives and women, men and women, that our friend Kamala Harris has exposed. So where do we go with the Democratic Party? You and I are both self-described progressives. Neither of us are great fans of Donald Trump or MAGA or the Republican Party. Josh Shapiro has apparently already shot back at Kamala. He's a fairly standard Democratic governor. I mean, we've got Buttigieg as well. Is it conceivable? We've got, of course, Mandami in New York. Is it conceivable that it will be business as usual in the next round of Democratic presidential candidates? Is it conceivable that in the race for the 28 nomination on the Democratic side, that we're going to get a lot of white governors like Shapiro basically trotting out the same language, the same television debates, the same farce that has resulted in such a catastrophe as the Democratic Party? Has anything changed? I mean, I don't suppose this book, 107 Days, will change anything.
I think that the two, even though they're both white guys, I think that the two potential candidates for the presidency that demonstrate some understanding of what's transpiring in our society are J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, and Gavin Newsom, governor of California. They're not so careful about their language. They speak with clarity and contempt for Trump and the Republican Party. They're not quick to apologize. And although Newsom, as we discussed in a previous program, really irked me with his selling out of transgender people, he has shown some capacity for imagination and growth with these tweets and the redistricting fight. But we can't have candidates who are still running on the script of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. With all due respect to both of those presidents, it's a different era. And Harris, in another leaked comment in this book, speaking of transgender people, comes out and says that she's, very concerned about transgender athletes, but she's also a lifelong ally of the LGBTQ plus community. And, here again, if you were that concerned, why didn't you say it during the campaign? And also, where's your sense of timing? I mean, these transgender people are under vicious attack right now, and this is what you come out with? So since Reagan, there have been Democrats who believe the path to power is trying to appeal to some mythic, Republican section of voters who are sleeper cells for the Democratic Party. And if we only use the right words,
Yeah, it's the people in your exurbia, David.
right, they'll come join us. That's
yeah. I mean, you've written books about exurbia and suburbia, this middle America, this mythic place.
Yeah, that's a delusion. So, so far, Newsom and Pritzker have shown that they have some capacity to fight in a style that, for better and for worse, coincides with our politics of confrontation. Because that's what we have right now, a politics of combat and confrontation.
And what about the Mandami phenomenon? Is that in any way relevant? You're a man on the left. I'm guessing that if Newsom or Pritzker win the nomination, you'll be disappointed with a lot of their policy stuff. Is there an opportunity for somebody on the left, post Bernie Sanders, to come through and articulate an honest take on what needs to change in America, that, as you say, doesn't just sound like some recycled nonsense from electoral PR firms?
To correct your setup there, I think that Pritzker's been a very good governor of Illinois, and I'm
not suggesting he hasn't.
I'm pleased with him on a policy level, so I wouldn't be disappointed if he won.
What's he just because you're in Illinois? I don't know much about him. What has he done that's particularly impressed you?
He's had a commitment to progressive principles on issues of healthcare, education. He hasn't hesitated to defend immigrants, to oppose ICE, to defend LGBTQ plus people without the caveats of, I'm concerned about the athletes. He has good policies on education. He's made it clear that Illinois is not going to become an indoctrination facility for these right-wing saboteurs of pedagogy. So I think Pritzker's been good. I don't know as much about California, but it seems like Newsom's more of a mixed bag. As far as the future of the left is concerned, the left needs to find a way to speak to the fundamental economic inequalities that give people plenty of reason for anger and despair without dismissing the concerns of Blacks and Latinos and women and LGBTQ plus people as identity politics.
What about Jewish husbands? What about Jewish husbands, David?
Well, you could answer that question.
I'm a Jewish husband, yeah.
Right.
I'm victimized by everybody.
So, too often they break this into an either or. Bernie Sanders himself was guilty of that when he said that the Democratic Party's too involved in identity politics and needs to do more to win back the white working class. Well, that's identity politics from another angle. So we had one conversation in which we discussed Jesse Jackson and his
debate with David Duke.
Yes, and his political presidential campaigns of the 80s.
And you've written books on Jackson, so you're an authority on him.
Yes, his presidential campaigns of the 80s, I think, act as good models. They would need some adjustment for modern times, but for how to speak to economics and race, economics and gender, because you can't neglect one in the name of the other.
I wonder finally, David, whether the fact that both the two people that you spoke of positively in terms of potentially running for president, Gavin Newsom and Pritzker in Illinois, they're both from very powerful, wealthy families. They were both They're not Bill Clinton, they're not Barack Obama, they're not self-made individuals. What does that suggest about the America of the 2020s?
I'm curious if maybe your question's a bit broader, but I'll start by saying I wonder if maybe because they come from wealth, they have a Kennedy family-like willingness.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Bobby Kennedy, and Chris Matthews actually has a new book coming out later this year on the 10 things we can still learn from Bobby Kennedy. So maybe the Kennedys are becoming relevant again.
Yeah, and I think you and I did a show once on Ted Kennedy. Maybe they have a greater capacity for risk taking because they're both men of great wealth. They have a more willingness to politic in such a way that risks offending people. Perhaps that makes their wealth a virtue because it gives them a callus against the careerism that reduces so many politicians to boring scripts and
interesting, David. So maybe this will be a subject for another show. Maybe you have to have wealth to tell the truth. We shall see. I don't think David or I are suggesting you go out and buy 107 Days by Kamala Harris, but that was the subject of this book.
Buy our books instead, right?
Certainly buy your book. I think your books are better than mine. And I have to ask, David, is it conceivable that Harris will have the nerve to run for president again? And what happens if she does?
I don't think so with this book. I don't think the reaction to this book. I mean, if she thought that this book was going to launch her into 2028, then she should probably seek psychiatric help rather than political consultation.
Now you're beginning to sound like me. Well, if any of the Harris people are watching, and I know my wife is friendly with some of them, if Kamala wants to announce her candidacy for the next presidential election, she can do it on this show because, as you can tell, I'm very, very sympathetic. And maybe, David, you can come on too.
Sounds great.
Good to talk, David. Keep well. Keep your criticism. We need guys like you in our surreal times. Thank you, and we'll talk again in the not too